For the first time in more than 50 years, NASA wants to send humans back to the moon. But this isn't just about planting a flag. This time, it's about building a future.
For the first time in over half a century, we are going back. But NASA's Artemis mission is so much more than a flag-planting revisit. It's the first crucial step to a permanent human presence on the moon and the gateway to Mars. The Artemis program aims to set up a long-term outpost at the lunar South Pole, a stepping stone to Mars and beyond. But this grand vision is hitting massive turbulence. The timeline is crumbling. The reason? An unprecedented technological hurdle, perfecting orbital refueling on a scale never before attempted. It's a logistical puzzle so complex that NASA's own safety advisors are sounding the alarm.
But the clock is ticking. With delays piling up, technical hurdles mounting, and China closing in, the race is tighter than ever. And NASA isn't just racing against its own ambitious goals. A new, high-stakes international space race is on. While the U.S. bets on private innovation, its competitor is moving with methodical, state-funded precision. The pressure has never been higher.
Okay, picture this. You're at your desk, just trying to get through a normal day at a big accounting firm, KPMG. You're swimming in spreadsheets, deadlines are breathing down your neck, and then an email hits your inbox. But it's not about a new project. It's not about bagels in the break room. No, it's an all-staff message warning about World War III, the rise of the Antichrist, and the rapture happening really, really soon.
Right? So let's just dive into this, because the email, which was sent by a trainee accountant, was intense. It literally described the corporate office as a demonic altar, claiming that the ancient god Baal was being fed by the blood and energy of all the overworked employees. I mean, what a metaphor for the daily grind, right? It frames the office not just as a place you work, but as a site for actual spiritual warfare. But here's where it gets really amazing. The reaction. A screenshot of this email ends up on Reddit. And while everyone's losing their minds, one user asks the most perfect, deadpan question you could possibly imagine. Does this mean busy season is off? And that single question, it just perfectly captures this bizarre collision we're going to unpack. Ancient apocalyptic prophecy meeting modern, soul-crushing corporate burnout. So, what was actually in this warning? Because it wasn't just some vague, the end is nigh kind of thing. Oh no, this was a super detailed prediction with a whole theological framework and a very, very specific date for when the world as we know it is supposed to end. So, at the very heart of this email is the concept of the rapture. Now, if you're not familiar with it, it's a belief held by some Christians that at some point in the future, all the true believers, both living and dead, are just going to be snatched away from the earth to meet Jesus up in the sky. It's basically seen as an escape hatch from a coming period of really intense suffering on earth called the tribulation. So, why that exact date? Well, people who get into this kind of date setting often try to link biblical prophecies to Jewish holidays. In this case, September 23rd to 24th in 2025 lines up with the Feast of Trumpets, also known as Rosh Hashanah. The logic as it goes is that since Jesus' death and resurrection lined up with Passover, maybe his big return will line up with another major feast day. And they get to this timeline through a very specific and, let's be honest, highly interpretive kind of math. It starts with the idea of a 7-year tribulation. But in biblical prophecy, a year is often seen as 360 days. So you multiply that out, you get 2,520 days. Then they pull a passage from the book of Daniel, and based on their interpretation, they add an extra 30 days. And boom, that's how you land on a 2,550-day timeline. It's definitely a controversial way to do it, but that's the framework they're using. Okay, now here is a really crucial point. This is not a settled issue, not at all. Even within the communities that absolutely believe in the rapture, there is a huge, fierce debate about when it's actually supposed to happen in relation to that final tribulation period. The debate really boils down to two main camps. You've got the pre-trib view, which is what our KPMG employee believes. That says Christians get raptured before those 7 years of suffering even begin. But then you have the post-trib view, which argues the complete opposite, that believers have to go through that whole difficult period and only get taken up to meet Jesus at his final public return after it's all said and done. So let's look at how people actually argue about this stuff online. Here's a quote from a Reddit user that just perfectly sums up the pre-trib logic.
They're saying the Antichrist, or AC, can't rise to power until something called the restrainer is gone. They see that restrainer as the church, filled with the Holy Spirit. So once the church is raptured out of here, boom, the restrainer's gone, chaos ensues, and the Antichrist can finally make his move.
But the post-trib side pushes back, and they go straight to Jesus' own words in the Bible. This user quotes from Matthew 24, where Jesus seems to clearly say that the gathering of his elect happens after the tribulation. For them, it's case closed. The sequence is right there, coming from the highest authority. You can see how this debate gets so intense. It's all about how you read these key passages.
Now, if this whole idea of setting a specific date for the end of the world feels a little familiar, well, it should. This is not a new thing at all. In fact, it's part of a very long, very well-documented history of prophetic predictions that just, well, didn't happen. I mean, this pattern of setting dates goes way back. You have the Great Disappointment of 1844, all the shifting predictions around 1914, and hey, some of us are old enough to remember the whole Y2K panic, which got all tangled up in biblical prophecy. History is just littered with these super confident predictions that are followed by nothing, just a normal sunrise. The details change, but the ending is usually the same. All right, so let's circle all the way back to that original email. Because when you look closer, this prophetic warning seems to be about something way more immediate, way more tangible than the actual apocalypse. It's about the soul-crushing reality of modern work. The employee basically connects the dots for us. The beast system isn't just some future global government. To them, it's the corporate structure right now that demands everything from you, that makes you miss birthdays, weddings, your life. The language is apocalyptic, sure, but the pain is so deeply human and relatable. It's that feeling of sacrificing your actual life at the altar of your job. And listen, this isn't just a feeling. There's actual data to back this up. Research, and this is the ironic part, it's from KPMG itself, shows that junior auditors spend a staggering 76% of their time on just basic data prep, grunt work. That means only a quarter of their time is spent on the actual analysis and insight they went to school for. You can see how that would start to feel like you're just feeding your life force into a machine for basically nothing in return. And you really don't have to look far to realize this person wasn't alone. Go on the KPMG subreddit, and it is just an outpouring of the exact same feeling. 70 to 90 hours a week and no end in sight. Push the staff even harder. This feeling that trying to get ahead just means you get more work piled on you. The promotions are a mere deception. Suddenly, the apocalyptic language in that email starts to sound less like a prophecy and more like a desperate scream from the heart of a very real, very widespread culture of burnout. So all of this brings us to a really fundamental reframing of this entire story. Maybe we've been asking the wrong question this whole time.
What's really interesting is that the Bible itself actually gives people tools for how to handle claims like this. Jesus tells his followers to be fruit inspectors, to judge a teaching not by how sensational it sounds, but by the outcome, the fruit that it produces in people's lives. Does it lead to fear and anxiety, or does it lead to faith and peace?
And that's not just a one-off idea either. The message throughout is pretty consistent. Be watchful, for sure, but explicitly avoid trying to set dates. The encouragement is to test everything, not to just blindly follow these speculative timelines.
So, when you put it all together, the real question here isn't whether some specific prophecy is true or false. The real question is, what does this whole bizarre incident tell us about the world we're living in right now?
What does it mean when the feeling of being overworked, of being undervalued, feels so crushing, so total, that the only language that seems big enough to describe it is the language of cosmic battles and the literal end of the world? This story was never really just about a single prophecy. It's a mirror. It's reflecting a modern world where, for a lot of people, the daily grind already feels an awful lot like the apocalypse.
So who will win the new space race? And what will they find when they get there? So what's at stake? It's more than national pride. It's about who controls the strategic resources of the lunar South Pole and who sets the rules for the next era of humanity in space. The technical hurdles are historic, but the geopolitical stakes are even higher. The race for the 21st century moon is on, and the outcome is anything but certain.